The government completely destroyed the U.S. banking system. We just haven't seen all of the consequences yet, but believe me, they're coming.
In today's video, Peter Schiff, founder, CEO and global strategist of Euro-Pacific Capital, gives a warning that the 2008 crisis was just the prelude to a larger sovereign debt crisis in the United States that may lead to a collapse of the US dollar.
The main reason that everybody is so focused on the CPI, it's not really because, they're really worried about inflation, although most people are. I'm talking about Wall Street. When I'm talking about investors, that's who's like anxiously looking at the CPI. And a lot of wealthy investors, hedge fund managers, all these Wall Street guys, they don't really care about, what it costs to go to the grocery store or how much it costs to fill up their car with gas. That's not a problem. What they're worried about is interest rates. That's a big problem because a lot of these guys are highly leveraged and they've been gouging on a banquet of cheap money for more than a decade. And the reason that everybody is waiting for inflation to go back down to the holy grail of 2% is so interest rates can go back down. That's what they're concerned about, not the price of milk, or the price of gas, the price of money, credit. That's what everybody is concerned about. So everybody wants inflation to go back down so the Fed can finally reduce interest rates and get them back down to a level that is affordable. Because remember, because the Fed kept interest rates so low for so long, everybody's got a bunch of debt, right? Everybody just acted as if rates would never go up. And of course, that was foolish because it was inevitable that they would eventually go up. But again, no one cared, right? Everybody just wanted to party, and dance while the music was playing. They didn't care that it was eventually going to stop. And so they just acted like it would go on forever. And so everybody is waiting for lower rates, and it's not going to happen because inflation is not going back down to, it's just not going to happen. It really never should have been below 2% or even anywhere near 2%. The fact that we got away with these low CPI prints for so many years, despite the fact that we created so much inflation. Again, remember, the CPI is measuring inflation. It's not inflation. Inflation is not prices going up. It's not wages going up. It's not costs going up. No, it's money supply going up. And money supply went way up. Even if it's shrinking a little bit now, which is just temporary, it went way up. And you're not going to get rid of all that inflation just by taking rates from 0 to 5.25, 5.5, whatever, and leaving them there for a year or so. That's not going to do it. It's not going to reverse better than a decade of inflation creation, especially when the government, which is ultimately the source of the inflation that the Fed creates, or the impetus for the Fed to create the inflation, when you have budget deficits exploding, even before we're officially in a recession, the deficits are just skyrocketing. We have $2 trillion, deficits, really, budget deficits, and record trade deficits. Inflation is not going away. Inflation is going to get much worse. And again, what people still don't get is a year of interest rate hikes. That's a price hike, right? Interest rates, the price of money, it's a price. It's gone up. That is going to factor into the price of everything. I think a lot of other products and services have a long way to go as far as hikes in order to make up for that, because it's a cost structure, just like labor costs. We know labor costs are going up. The big UPS now, they're going to have to pay. I think I read that truck drivers, the long haul truck drivers, I don't even think they've ratified the contract yet. These guys actually might be holding out for more money. But I think that they're going to be paying these truck drivers $170,000 a year to drive trucks back and forth. And obviously, what's UPS going to do? They're going to pass that on. Now, obviously, at some point, they're going to get rid of these truck drivers completely. You know, truck driver is the #1 occupation in America for men. And all these truck drivers, of course, are going to be eliminated. And one of the reasons is the high cost of employing them. Of course, part of that has to do with the regulations involved in all the labor laws for these truck drivers. But as these wage costs are going up, clearly this gets passed on. Now, it's not that the wages are causing the prices to go up. Inflation is causing both wages and prices to go up. But sometimes there's a sequence. You get inflation, right? Food prices go up, rents go up. So now the workers need more money. And so they get a raise. And now their employers have to charge more for whatever they were doing. And everything kind of goes up. But what gets the ball rolling is the money printing, the expansion of the money supply. So all these guys that talk about a wage price spiral, they're wrong. Those are false things concocted by the government to try to blame the private sector for inflation. The same thing as cost push inflation. People say, well, prices go up because costs go up. But that's circular logic, because costs are just another word for prices. One person's cost is another person's price. If I'm a business, what's my cost of raw materials? Well, it's the price that I'm paying. It's the price that my suppliers are charging me. So it's two words for the same thing. So, saying prices go up because costs go up is like saying prices go up because prices go up. Well, that doesn't explain anything. What causes it to happen? It's inflation. It's the increase in money supply. And so nothing that the Fed has done thus far is going to succeed in bringing inflation back down to 2%. Now, what has happened is that we have seen a reduction of inflation from 9% headline to 2% headline. And that's mainly because we had a 50% drop in oil prices. And then you had some other commodity prices that came down, and we had a big rise in the dollar. And so all of that helped bring down headline CPI. But that's just transitory. That's not going to stay that way. But meanwhile, core, which never went up nearly as much as the headline, hasn't come down nearly as much. It's basically still around 5%, even as we're troughing on the reduction in inflation. And the Fed's got interest rates above 5%. It's like they've got interest rates all the way above 5%. They've shot all their big guns, basically. There's not much left in the barrel. Maybe another hike or two. But it's like, Superman is there, and you empty your revolver and all the bullets bounce off his chest. And then it's like, well, now what am I going to do? I can throw the gun at him, but that's not going to do anything. I mean, they don't have anything left. They can throw the gun at inflation, but that's about it. Because if the Fed really gets tough on inflation and moves interest rates up to where they need to be, well, everything collapses, right? Because nobody can afford to pay the debt. We just got the downgrade of U.S. Treasury debt, by Fitch. I talked about that on my last podcast. By the way, this week, Moody's came out and they downgraded a bunch of regional banks, which is typically what happens. They close the barn doors after the horses have left, except in this case, there's still some horses in the barn. I mean, they didn't wait till the absolute end to downgrade. Now, yeah, they could have done it a year or two ago. I mean, there was plenty of evidence that they should have downgraded these banks a year ago or more. But even now, it's not merely too late. I mean, I think there's a lot more downgrades to come because the banks are in a lot of trouble because of rising interest rates and falling asset prices, which, is going to happen because, it was low interest rates that propped up the assets. And now interest rates have gone up, so asset prices come collapsing down, but that's the collateral for their loans. Those are the assets that they have on their books. So the banks are in a lot of trouble. The Federal Reserve completely decimated the U.S. banking industry. Not just the Federal Reserve, but the U.S. government, through guaranteed bank accounts, completely corrupted the free market so that all of these banks were loaded up with risk because there were no free market forces to deter all that risk taking. So the government completely destroyed the U.S. banking system. We just haven't seen all of the consequences yet, but believe me, they're coming. But I want to get back to this July CPI that everybody was waiting for. And the consensus was that we were going to get a 0.2% increase in the CPI. And that's what we got. We got a 0.2% increase, which is the same increase we got the month before. So that doesn't seem like we're making a lot of progress. Year over year, we came out a little bit better than the consensus. They were looking for 3.3. That's the overall headline number. We got an increase of 3.2, but last month in June, it was 3%. And now we're up to 3.2. We're going in the wrong direction. We're supposed to be going down to 2. Instead, we just went up from 3 to 3.2. People to know just how bad inflation is. And so they try to hide the effects with a highly rigged CPI. Again, it's not that somebody fudges the numbers. It's that the very methodology that is used to compile the numbers is flawed. So by design, when they calculate the increase in prices, they're only capturing a portion of how much prices actually went up. So they don't have to rig the data. The index is already pre-rigged for them. So, it makes it a lot easier for the government to try to fool the people. But ultimately, the people have to pay the prices. So they're paying the real prices, not the pretend prices that are part of the CPI.